What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the podcast. And boy, do I have an awesome podcast for you guys today. In today's episode, I interview an OG of the Etsy world. I interviewed Jess from the Create and Thrive podcast. She also sells jewelry and has been selling jewelry since 2008. She helps other handmade sellers with their businesses. So she is also a coach. She's been doing that for the last 8 years as well. She joins me today and talks a little bit about her journey, her background, how she became a seller, how she evolved to be a coach and help other sellers, handmade people succeed online, her business journey. We talk about some of the roadblocks that she's encountered along the way. She has a definitely an interesting story. And then we also talk about her experiences with coaching other handmade sellers and some of the issues, some of the common issues that they run into and the things that she helps them with so that they can avoid the same frustrations and pitfalls and make sure that they are doing the right things to be successful a lot sooner and a lot early on. But yeah, tune into today's podcast. It's going to be awesome. We talk about everything under the sun. It's always good to sit back and talk with another handmade seller, not to mention someone else that really puts a lot of time, energy, and thought into helping other people be successful and sharing her knowledge and sharing the things that she's learned in her journey, which is so important to kind of give back and share that knowledge, because the handmade community is a really great community, so many talented people. So it's always nice to be able to help that community out and share another perspective from someone that has a lot of similarities with my story and how I got started. And it's really nice to talk to someone like Jess, who has just so much experience and has been doing this for such a long time. So without further ado, let's dive into today's podcast. What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Handmade and Beyond podcast. I'm your host, LL, leader of the handmadeandbeyond.com website and community. I'm a self-employed entrepreneur, an Etsy expert, and business coach who's figured out how to make my entire living with my handmade business. Each week, I'll dive into strategies and success tips to help you with your handmade business, with Etsy, and everything in between. Let's dive in. All right, welcome to the show, Jess. Glad to finally get a chance to talk to you on the podcast. How are you?
Yeah, it's great to be here. Oh, it's good. I'm very happy to have a chat today.
Good. So you're actually calling in all the way from Australia, in case people don't get that by your accent. So I appreciate you calling in from so far away. The time difference is a little tricky for sure. It's the morning time, right, over there right now?
Yeah, it's just gone 9 a.m. on Tuesday morning for me.
Okay, yeah, because I know there's different depending on where you're at in Australia. It's different too, because it's such a big, it's such a big country. So
Yes.
I was I know it's the morning. I just don't know how early, how much she's gonna sacrifice this morning for me.
I'd normally be out of bed usually by now.
Okay. Yeah, that's the nice thing about, working for yourself. It's good and bad. It's like, do I sleep in a little bit longer this morning or not? I usually try to get up by like 7 or 8, but every once in a while, you just need to sleep in a little bit and kind of recoup.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but yeah, I like usually my strategy is I get up, I make my coffee, I take the dogs for a walk, and then I like to do like my computer work early in the morning. I don't know if you're the same, but I don't like to really talk that much. So I don't like to do like podcasts like right in the morning. I need to kind of warm myself up a little bit, before I talk, especially to someone else. Recording like a podcast with just myself is one thing, but to like kind of talk to someone else is a kind of a whole nother ball game there. So
I was walking around warming my voice up beforehand to make sure it wasn't too croaky.
Yeah. Yeah, well, and then like, because I need to get that pot of coffee in me too to get me wound up. Now right now it's 7:00 p.m. So I'm winding down, but now I'm not gonna be able to go to bed because I'm gonna be all after talking. But yeah, 'cause when I worked, before, I worked in corporate America for several years, for about 15 years before I actually stepped away to do Etsy full time. And
Mhm.
I managed a pretty big division, but I was always the guy that would walk in the morning, and it's like you're managing all these people, so they want to like say hi to you, especially if you're the boss. But I like didn't want to talk to anyone, so I'd have to like try to be
Mhm.
nice because I'm like, man, I don't want to talk to anyone. It's too early.
I need
So
my quiet
yeah, we went
time.
down kind of a rabbit hole there, but for my listeners that aren't familiar with you, if you don't mind, like just kind of diving into kind of your background a little bit and your businesses as far as like what you're doing now, because we're very similar, it seems,
Mhm.
with what we're doing. So if you don't mind sharing that.
No, no worries. So yeah, I once upon a time I was a teacher and I worked in education. And then I started a little hobby business on the side, selling some jewelry on Etsy. This was in 2008
Oh
that
wow.
I
Okay.
started. Yep. Back then, that was pretty much the only option that there was to sell online was Etsy for handmade.
Hmm.
And I'm a bit of an introvert, and I had a full time job, so I'm like I didn't really fancy going to markets every weekend, and I was, I'd been in love with the internet since I was a teenager. So I'm like, surely I can figure out a way to sell it online, and found Etsy. And that was like, oh, I'll just put stuff up and people will buy it. How easy will that be? Little did I know. So yeah, I did it as a hobby for about a year and a half, and then ended up going full time at the beginning of 2010, and kind of had my own website by then. And then in about 2013, I kept having people asking me, like, how do you do this? How did you, make these sales? But all the questions about handmade business, because I'd become quite active in like the Australian handmade business community, which was, quite small back then. I'd actually run a little independent magazine for a little while called Bespoke. So I had a lot of connections with a lot of people in the community.
Hmm.
And I just thought, why don't I just run a course, to teach people all this stuff that they keep asking me. And so I launched this course called Set Up Shop in 2013. And alongside launching the course, I started a new business called Create and Thrive, which is my online education business for makers. And that's kind of where it all went from there. And then in 2015, I launched my membership, the Thriver Circle. And yeah, just been going on since then, sort of teaching people all over the world these business skills. And had the podcast, I think, started in 2016. And then recently I've been focusing on YouTube. And there's always things to learn and new things to try. So
Hmm.
it's always fun.
Yeah. So you're pretty much you're kind of an OG of the Etsy world, huh?
I have been around for a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, you started way. I didn't start until 2014, and
Right. Yep.
I had to grind for 4 years before I even got to
Mm-hmm.
the possibility of stepping away, because I had by every um, seemingly, a good job. I had I was a director of a pretty big division, in corporate America. It's what society teaches you to do, right? It's like go to school, get a good job, and then
Mm-hmm.
you're set. And then you work for quote unquote the man for 50 years, and then you get 3 years of freedom when you retire, and then you die, so I was,
Not my idea of fun.
yeah, it wasn't for me too. And I have the creative, I've always been creative. I've always been interested in business and selling, and making my own money, not, so it's like very stifling when you're in
Mm.
that corporate, atmosphere. The only thing I did like kind of, you were a teacher in the past, which is cool. So you're obviously to teach other people, that's kind of, it's understandable that that's your passion, and that's what you kind of leveraged, as an entrepreneur. And that's one of the things that I probably enjoyed the most, is when I got to do like trainings and
Mm.
presentations and like one-on-one coaching, and I could see kind of the results of that. I could present it in a way that wasn't, intimidating, that was helpful, that wasn't, that would really truly, help employees grow. And
Mm.
that's what I liked about it. All the other dealing with problems I didn't create thing. That's what that's what I hated about it. And I really wanted to step away and kind of, just do my own thing. I wanted to have my own problems, I'm a
Yes.
problem solver. I was confident, in myself, that I could grow my
Mm.
business. And really what it came down to was, if I had that extra time, I was doing this all on the side which probably you were too, right? As a, as a teacher, you were
Yeah,
doing a lot of it
quite a
on the
bit. Yeah.
side. So it's like, what can you do
Yeah.
with those hours that, if you're not working, and you spend the time
Mhm.
on your business. So, that's kind of how I looked at it. So I don't know if that was kind of similar as far as you, and kind of how you looked at it too.
Yeah, I mean, I'd kind of toyed, like I said, I was a teenager in the 90s, and we got the internet at home when I was about 15 for the first time. And I taught myself HTML, and I used to build websites. That was my hobby. And I just loved the internet. And my brain was like, one day I wonder if I can make a living doing this. But it was such a dream back then. We didn't really understand what the internet was capable of then.
Mm-hmm.
So I still, went to uni, got my degrees, did the normal thing, and
Mm-hmm.
just expected. I was actually going to be a scientist originally, and then I went off and did teaching instead. As well as, I should say, I did both degrees. And then, yeah, so I'd kind of along the years of the 2000s, I kind of tried a few little things, to try to make a bit of. I had an online editing job for a while, and I
Mm-hmm.
had a few other little businesses that I tried, but I didn't really, know what I was doing and stuff. But you don't realize how much you learn just through trying those little things along the way. And I was very comfortable with building websites and blogs and all that sort of stuff, because I'd done that before. And so it was kind of natural for me to do something online. And I think you touched on something before, which I think is really important. And you said you had the confidence that you could figure it out. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's so important for people. I see a lot of people who struggle, a lot of my students who struggle because they don't have that confidence in themselves that they can overcome obstacles. They get stressed, or they kind of throw their hands up when something gets a little bit hard, and it can hold people back from, actually achieving this thing, because there's going to be a lot of obstacles along the way, but they're just stepping stones
Mm-hmm.
to going up the mountain, really.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And that's what I tell people is like, if you haven't failed yet, you haven't done enough of the things, right? That
Exactly.
teaches you, failure teaches you so much more than success
Mm.
does. Because then, if you failed, then to pivot, what to do next, not to do the same thing, because it didn't quite work. So there are lessons if you look at it like that. And that's where,
Mm.
I get a lot of Etsy sellers, a lot of, my students, they're so afraid to like open the shop. Like they're
Yes.
so afraid to open the thing. I'm the type of person where it's like, I'll do it and then ask for forgiveness later. I'll figure it
Yeah,
out,
yeah,
later. You know what I mean?
exactly.
I'll just jump all in head first.
What's
And
it
then
gonna hurt?
they're
Like, just do it.
yeah. And then they're afraid. I'm like, come on, just do it. You gotta get to failure faster. If you
Yes.
open it, maybe you're gonna have to pivot surely. You're gonna have to, learn different things surely. Maybe you're not even in the right niche. Maybe it's not
Mm-hmm.
gonna be your passion, but I'd rather figure that out now than wait 2 years and figure it out, because in those two
Exactly.
years, what could you have done?
Mm-hmm.
What could you have learned? And I always say too, entrepreneurs are problem solvers. That's part of being an
Mm-hmm.
entrepreneur. So, you're gonna run into problems, but again, they're your problems to figure out. And you got to be a problem solver and kind of do different things, look at it differently. There's always a solution out there. You just have to find it. And we're living in an age now where there's so many resources and so many ways to figure it out and get that help. So, and that's what I enjoy, about, you know, helping other people, in small businesses. Obviously, we both help people in the handmade and the Etsy world, but just in general, as a small business, just helping them, being like a support system and then help them figure
Mm.
out those problems. You just let them know that they're not alone, because that's the biggest thing when I got started is
Yes.
it's a very lonely journey, because it's like, while my family, is really supportive, they don't really understand,
Mm.
truly. So it's kind of like a little bit of a lonely journey too. So I'm sure it's probably one of the things that's kind of fulfilling for you as well, to be able to kind of fill that void and just give people the support, and the motivation they need sometimes. I mean, that's what I probably enjoy the most, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. Like, it's just so rewarding when somebody messages you and you're like, hey, I've opened my shop and thank you so much. I wouldn't have been able to do it without you. And you see your students go on to be really successful. And And even the ones who don't, the ones who are like, hey, I've done your course or I joined your program and I've realized it's not for me after all. I'm like, well, that's great too. Like you've tried and you've realized it's not what you really want to do. Go find the thing you really want to do. So there's lots of ways to succeed on the journey. And yeah, I love that feeling of seeing people learn things and try things and build something for themselves. I think that's a really valuable thing. I think we've learned in the past few years how valuable having your own thing is. I'm a big believer that a job is not as secure as people perhaps think it is. I'd prefer to be self-employed and be in control of, being able to make my own money. I find that quite safe for me. I feel more safe with my own business than I do with a job. So
Yeah. Well, that's, if anything, COVID has definitely taught us that, right? That even the safest jobs aren't really safe. You really don't have that control that you think that you do. Your own business can be just as safe, and you can have a lot more control over it as well. So, it's not, working for someone else is always a risk for sure. So,
and some of us just aren't very well suited for working for someone else either. We
yeah.
like to be in control. We like to, run our ship our way and things like that. So if you are that sort of person, then having your own business is a really good choice as well.
Yeah, well, especially creative, the creative
Yeah.
mindset people, it's like you're shoved in this like little box, and it's like, no, you can't be yourself. You can't be as creative as you want to be. You got to follow this procedures manual. You got to hit the SOPs, follow the procedures manual. That's not fun. That's very stifling. So, so you're in jewelry. You're kind of like me. I do my best selling Etsy shop is clothing. I do graphic style tees. So I do, my designs. I actually still do a lot of my own screen printing. So I wear a lot of different hats, and you're speaking of the control thing, right? I have that problem. It's hard for me to kind of outsource stuff even now.
Oh, yeah.
And all the stuff that I'm doing. It's like, oh man, I know I need to outsource this, but it's like no one's going to do it as good as me. No one's going to have the
Yes.
same commitment. So that's something that's neither here nor there. That's my own kind of journey that I'm dealing with right now. But yeah, it's so jewelry and like clothing, and these are markets that are very, very competitive. There's a lot of competitors. So how did you, you started it obviously a while ago. It wasn't as competitive now, but kind of like, what would you say, and to someone that tells you, oh, I don't really want to start, or I don't want to do the niche that I really want to do because it's too competitive, or it's I'm not going to be able to sell anything because there's just too many people selling similar items or in the niche.
Yeah, I think, I think it's a valid concern. Definitely, obviously, when I started, there was a lot less people selling on Etsy. There was just a lot less people selling handmade, full stop. It just wasn't a big thing back then like it is now. One thing I do want to say, I hear a lot of my students or a lot of people say, I don't want to sell on Etsy because that's too much competition. So I'll just set up my own website. And I'm like, hang on a second. You do realize by setting up your own website, you're competing with the entire internet. Like it's not like there's some magical difference there that you're somehow going to be more successful in your own website than on Etsy. I'm a big fan of Etsy, as in, the benefit of being on Etsy is that you take advantage of the traffic they work to bring to you. Whereas when you have your own website, you have to do all of the work. And it's, I think, a lot harder in some ways to get started unless you have a lot of money to throw into advertising, or you have a hell of a lot of time to throw into marketing your business. So, that's why I usually say, hey, start on Etsy, learn the ropes first. As to the competitiveness, I think the way to be more successful is to definitely find a niche. Like I call it a micro niche. So like, sure, I'll give myself as an example. I make sterling silver jewelry, as do bazillions of other people, right? So if you take that down a level, I say, well, I make most of my stuff is made from recycled silver. So that's, eco sterling silver jewelry. Take it down another notch. It's minimalist kind of classic designs. Take it down another notch. I pretty much do nothing but silver. So I don't like have gemstones and stuff like that. So it's very minimal designs. Take it down another notch. We have wedding rings. So we specialize in sterling silver eco wedding rings. And again, down another notch, we specialize in like oxidized rings, and that's like our micro niche. So you can see how if I just said I make sterling silver jewelry, the idea of competing there would be almost, you would feel like it was almost impossible. But you got to think on the micro level of like every single product you have, how can you make it stand out in the crowd? How can you have the best photos? How can you work on your SEO so it's the most unique? And don't be afraid to kind of focus on those long tail keywords. And if you haven't heard what that means, it's basically a very specific keyword that might be a couple of phrases long. And the reason why they're good is because, sure, not a lot of people might be searching for them, but the people who are searching for them will find you and then hopefully buy from you. So don't get caught up in having to try to be, I think this is a mistake a lot of beginners make, is trying to get everybody as their customer.
Mm-hmm.
You really want to focus on your ideal customer, that very specific person who's going to want the very specific thing that you make. And I think also a lot of beginners sort of throw a lot of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And I think that's good. I think that experimental phase can be really helpful for your business. You can sort of see what people are attracted to, what people are clicking on, what people are buying. And I know in my business, I definitely used that to direct my future designs. I was like, well, people seem to really enjoy or be buying this particular type of style. How can I sort of make more jewelry in that particular type of style? And that's how I got some of my best sellers, to be honest. So yeah.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with everything that you said there, because it's so important to, honing on your niche or niche, however you say that, whatever camp you're on, niche. I flip flop all the time. It's like I can't stick to one. I just, whatever comes out, Yeah, then because like you said, if you try to compete, or if you try to target everyone, you target no one, as the old marketing adage goes. So you have to know your audience, have a loose plan, at least for what you want to offer. And then another thing, I think, kind of along the lines of what you were saying, is, throwing things at the wall. It's more of, helps your customers tell you what they want, and it helps guide your shop for your future. Because I strongly believe in the 80-20 rule. I think it's alive and well, especially when it comes to e-commerce. About 80% of your products aren't going to do great, and most of your sales are going to come from 20% of your products. Well, if you've only tried, to put out 10 items, I mean, the chances of you, making sales is slim to none. Not to mention, you're not giving the algorithm enough information to work with. You're not testing out enough stuff. You really have to have a pretty strong catalog out of the gate, and then use that to kind of guide you for the future as far as building your business up, and those roadblocks. But yeah, I think it's one of those things, is you don't have to have it all figured out at the beginning. You do have to have, a general idea of what niche or niche you want to be in. It doesn't mean you can't pivot, and add different items, and kind of, niche down as you go along, and kind of refine that as you go along. Because a lot of people, I think that they have to have it all figured out at the beginning, and then it doesn't work, and they're like, oh man, Etsy doesn't work, I'm closing the shop, this is a scam. It's, but it's just, you can't expect it. It's a journey, as I always say. It's you have to embrace the journey. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. Some people
Oh my God, that is my catchphrase. Absolutely.
Is it?
Yeah. I've been saying that for 10 years. It's so true. Like, you got to remember that. Like, you just cannot try and think it's going to be a month and you'll be successful. Like, come on.
Yeah. And I think that's, as great as the internet is, as freeing as it is, because we can do all these amazing things online and reach people across the world, talk to people in Australia right now. It's so amazing, but it also sets the wrong expectations. You see these people on Instagram or other, these businesses where it's like, I did this and now I'm a millionaire. I did this and I've made 100,000 sales in a week. And it's just like, no, it may happen. I mean, you actually have to try. It could happen. Awesome. But the chance of it is probably not going to happen, and it's not going to happen fast. So you have to be committed for months and years. If you are committed, then good things will happen. But you have to go in with that right, that expectation and the right mindset. So that's why a lot of, at the beginning of my students, I do a whole lot of like mindset type
Yeah.
things just to make sure that they have the right expectations. Like even if, because that's another thing too, as a, a successful seller, as a coach, I think people come in and think sometimes, oh, okay, if I get help from Jess, then I'm immediately going to be, top 1% seller or make
Mm,
hundreds of sales. And it's still, we can help get you there faster, but the
mm,
journey and the actions that you have to take is still your own. So that's where
yeah.
even still, you still have to have the right expectations and the right mindset. And I definitely, value anyone that's going to ask for help and try to get there a lot faster, because that's one of the things that I wish that I would have did early on, is not try to figure out every little
Yes.
thing myself. Because I can't tell you how many times I corrected my listings, my pictures, my shop, and completely changed things and wasted so much time doing it because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. And I was throwing things at the wall. I was like, oh my God. Looking back at it now, I
Yeah.
was like, man, I would have moved so much faster than if I, just tried to get a little bit of help early on.
Yep. I totally agree. Like the only help I had at the beginning, and I have to be thankful to these women, was there was Etsy teams back then were a big thing. And I was in an Australian Etsy team, and we had like just a chat on the Etsy platform. You used to have like a team chat on the Etsy platform, and they just were amazing. Like I would be like, how do I do this? What is this? And they would always help me out. And without them, I don't know where I'd be. And, even then I wish I'd gotten a lot more help elsewhere, because I mean, I must have, rephotographed my stuff, I don't know how many times. And I tried so many different designs. There came a point, I think about 4 years in, where I like culled like 2/3 of my designs, because I had like 450 products in my shop or something insane, because I just kept making and trying new things.
Mhm.
So it's always a learning journey. And I think, sure, people like us can help you and make it a bit faster, but you still have to go through the journey for
Yeah.
you, because everybody's different and every business is going to be different.
Yeah, for sure. So you've been a full-time Etsy seller for a while now, which is awesome. I mean, that's always the goal. I never would have thought that I would have stepped away to do it full time when I first started, because I remember my first goal was, if I could get one sale a day, that'd be amazing. If I could just do
Yeah.
one sale a day, I'd be set. And then once you start hitting one sale a day, you're like, okay, maybe I need, maybe 3, maybe 4, that'd be really good. And then you
Mm.
start thinking like, okay, if I'm getting these consistently, could I do this full time? Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, what would you say is kind of that helped you, or maybe like a struggle that you overcame early on that really helped you get to the point of being able to fast track your shop so you could step away and do it full time? Because that's, I think, a goal for a lot of people. Not everyone. Some people are happy doing it,
Mhm.
part time or on the side for that extra money to pay bills or their car payment or whatever. But I think a lot of people are just like, well, full time would be kind of a dream. That'd be kind of amazing.
Well, I'm a bit of a strange case, because for me it was completely accidental. And I'll explain what happened.
Okay.
So I'd been running my business as a hobby for about 16 months. And at the time, I was working as the manager of a tuition center. So I wasn't a teacher, I was managing a tuition center. And my boss came to me and said, it was a franchise. And he's like, I'm going to sell the business. Would you like to buy it? And at the time, I just come back from the September school holidays, where I just gotten married to my husband, who is English. So he was in Australia on a prospective spouse visa, which meant
Mhm.
he couldn't work. So, so then we just gotten married. My boss comes to me saying, basically, I'm going to sell the business. And I'm like, well, either I lose my job or I buy, like, what's going to happen here? And, I took it home and we discussed it. I'm like, I enjoy it, but the passion's not there for this particular business. And I don't think I want to run it. So we thought, hey, this is like a perfect opportunity to pick up sticks and go like travel for a year before we come back and settle down. Because my husband had a house back in England, so he had some money coming in. We had a bit of money there. And so I quit my job at the end of the year, because the end of our school year is December here. So I quit my job at the end of the year, and we moved back to my parents' property and bought an empty van and turned it into a camper van. And our
Oh, that's
plan was to travel around
awesome.
Australia
That is
in a camper
awesome.
van for a year. And my dad It's funny, he doesn't think of himself as a maker, but he's one of those guys who fixes everything, makes everything. He has like his own lathe. He has a massive workshop full of tools. So we're like, Dad'll have a tool to make everything. And yeah, he did. And he's an engineer, so he helped us build, design it and everything. So it was a super fun project. And I closed my shop during this time because I'm like, we're going to be working on the van that, then we're going to go traveling. I'll put it aside for now. But then what happened was I actually had some dental issues which were ongoing, and there was a problem after problem. So we couldn't leave because I kept having to get stuff fixed.
Man.
And so it was about February at this point, and I'm like, well, neither of us have jobs. We're living at my parents' place. We were literally living in their barn, like in a room in the barn. And I'm like, okay, why don't I just reopen my shop and try to sell some stuff to make, get a bit of money, more money coming in. And I just I had nothing else to do, so I threw myself into the business full time. My husband did the house spouse thing, so he just took over everything else, like the shopping, the cooking, the cleaning, everything domestic. He just did all of that, and I just devoted myself to the business. And by the time my mouth was all fixed up, it was like September. It was ridiculous, but the business had just kind of taken off at that point. And we sort of sat down and went, what are we like? Should we just roll with this? Should we just keep working and keep running this business and kind of see what happens? And that's what we decided to do. And we never got to do the full Australia trip, but we've done like all of the East Coast and some of the South Coast, which, if you know Australia, is a lot. So, we've done some awesome trips. But and we was for the next 5 years, I think 6 years, we lived in that one room, which eventually became 2 rooms in the barn. We lived and worked in that space.
Oh my God.
And together all day, every day. And eventually I started giving him little jobs like, can you do the bookkeeping for me so I don't have to do that? And can you, and then I started training him how to make the rings as well. So like he makes all our rings now. And he does a whole bunch of other work.
Wow.
So
and you're still married after all that, living in the close quarters.
He's my employee now. And it was like, honestly, it's so funny. Some people might look at that and go, oh, that was a sacrifice you made. But it actually was amazing. Like we had that time with my parents. My dad actually had cancer during that time. He's in remission now, but it was really nice to be there for them and support them in that time. And then we just we decided it was time to move on, and we found our beautiful house that we have now. And now we have separate offices and a separate workshop, which is really nice. And, a bit of separation between work and life. But, if all of that hadn't happened, then we wouldn't be where we are today. So it's just one of those, funny stories where something that seemingly is annoying or bad or frustrating turns into being the best thing that's ever happened to you.
Yeah. I mean, that's why it's important to just look at it from a positive standpoint. And it's, you would think being with your wife or husband for that amount of time, day in and day out, you could look at it as a bad thing, but that's a gift. That time together is something that a lot of people wish they had because they're working long hours at a job or, traveling all the time. So, time together like that, is an awesome thing. It's an awesome gift to have. And you got something, out of it that kind of changed your life. So that's really cool too.
Oh yeah.
Both of us, Yeah. Do you still have the van?
We still have the van. Yes. It's getting pretty old now, but we still do take little trips occasionally. It was our daily driver as well for like 8 years, but we do have another car now that we do most of our driving.
It's funny. Me and my girlfriend are actually thinking about doing that because, we've been looking right now, car prices. I don't know if in Australia it's the same way, but used cars are like crazy expensive right now. Right. But we were thinking of how cool it would be to get a Winnebago, not a huge one, just like a smaller one, like an older one, like 2000s, and just redo like the inside, because she does a lot of, she repurposes furniture, and she's very, very talented in that aspect. So I think it'd be kind of a fun thing, because I'm hands-on. I usually try to do things myself before I'll get someone else to do it. I'll try to figure it out. So I actually I need to fix a piece of my screen printing equipment. So it needs to be welded. And I was like, man, I could have someone do this, but I was like, you know what? I'm just going to buy a welder and figure out how to weld. So I just got the welder today. So probably tomorrow I'm going to figure out I'm going to teach myself how to weld. I'm like, well, maybe I'm going to weld my finger to the thing and lose a limb, but hey, I'll learn how to weld. And that is going to be a really good skill to have. So that's
Yeah, for
kind of the way
sure.
that I am. But yeah, it's so cool that you mentioned the van thing. Cause I'm like, man, that would be so fun. And I want one that you can walk around,
Yeah.
I don't want one that you can, where someone pulls it, because that's where, the US is very big. So a lot of time is spent driving, but I'm like, man, it'd be really neat if you could just go back to the couch and watch TV while someone's driving. We have dogs too, so we take them
Oh yeah.
everywhere. So yeah, that's in the cards, maybe in the next year or two. But yeah, so if I run into any van remodel problems,
Let me
I'll have
know.
to hit you up and ask you what the heck to do. But yeah, that's really cool. That's a funny story. That's why I really like to hear, because everyone has like a different story as far as why they
Yeah.
started their Etsy shop, how they learn how to, do do what they do. A lot of Etsy sellers and handmade sellers are just so talented, and it's stuff that they've been so gifted with, and the fact that they can leverage that to, make money and support their household is just awesome. And I think,
Amazing.
yeah,
Like,
and
it's an amazing feeling. Someone's just giving you money for something you've made. Like, what is that? That is just, I still remember my first sale and how amazing it felt. Like, yeah.
yeah, it's impactful too. If you read, the reviews, you see someone's like,
Mm,
oh, this, I wore this piece of jewelry to my engagement or wedding. I'm sure you probably get that. I sell a lot of, when I started my clothing company, I really focused a lot on like workout and motivational stuff, because that's what I liked.
mm-hmm,
That was kind of my niche. I've expanded it into other categories, all related to stuff that I like dog stuff. But some of the motivational stuff I would get, someone, like cancer survivors, different things like that. Someone did an interview for some show, and she was like a cancer survivor, and she's like, I wore your shirt, it meant so much. The message was so uplifting and inspirational. I was like, man, I never thought that. I knew, people wore clothing, but I never really anticipated that it would impact people that way, inspire people
yeah.
that way. And it's just kind of cool to kind of see that happen. Um,
Mm,
so it's really neat.
for
And
sure.
now more than ever, I think people want handmade, they want
Yeah.
repurposed stuff. They want cool vintage repurposed stuff. They want handmade stuff. They don't want big, box store mass produced stuff. And I think that's probably grown a lot too, since you first started Etsy, where it
Yeah.
wasn't, Etsy's grown a lot, but I think the demand has grown a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just handmade wasn't a big thing back then. People didn't really think to search it out, I would say, but it's definitely become much more of a thing, which is really wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think it's going anywhere. It's super popular. And I think it's the way that it's going to be, it's awesome. So, um, so how long have you actually been, I don't know if you said, but how long you've actually been actually coaching other handmade sellers, other Etsy sellers?
I guess it'll be 8 years now.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So a
Yeah.
long time, lots of experience. Um, yeah. And so you've coached hundreds, probably thousands of people, I would imagine
Thousands, yeah.
by this point. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people's businesses and lives, I'm sure you've impacted, which is awesome. Um, that's why I like doing it too. Cause you get to kind of give back. You're not just keeping all that knowledge, to yourself,
Mm-hmm.
hoarding all the stuff that you've learned. It's kind of sharing that and help other people grow the same way. So that's really cool. But what would you kind of say as far as, all the people that you've, or thinking back with the people that you coached, like what is there like one common problem or struggle that they have that you help them with, based on, I mean, I know there's a lot, there's a lot of problems that come, but is there like one overarching thing that you would say that people come to you and like, man, this is a struggle and I really need help with this, and based on your experiences?
Yeah, like you said, there are oodles of them. The one I think that is perhaps one of the most common and also one of the most difficult for people to overcome is the confidence thing. I really do think that's incredibly important. You get a small amount of students who are like gung-ho. They're like, yep, I'm doing this, it's happening, I'm launching it, it's out there. And they just want a little bit extra like practical help with figuring things out. But I find the vast majority of people, they just feel, I think they need the emotional support as well. Like they struggle to believe in themselves. They struggle to believe in the fact that they can, that they're, first of all, that they are worthy. Secondly, that their work is actually worthy and that people will actually want to buy it. I see that over and over again, people struggling with that idea. And so they hold themselves back and they hold their work back. And like we were talking about earlier, they don't launch. They're like stuck in this place, this pre-launch place. Or if they do launch, it's like really down, like they don't want to talk about it. They're just kind of doing it on the down low. They're embarrassed to tell their friends or family about it. And, so I think that perhaps has changed a bit over the years because, as you said, handmade is becoming a bit more well known and I guess accepted as a thing that people do, running a handmade business. But I remember way back, I think probably maybe my second year full time, I was at family Christmas, and one of my cousin's husbands was like, "Oh, so how's the business? How's the little business go?" I could tell you because he was in business, right? So I could tell he was like, "Yeah, whatever." I'm like, "Oh yeah, I made like this," and I said how much we made, and I saw his eyes widen, like, "What? like how is that possible?" And I'm just like, yeah, so it's going great, thanks. So that idea that you can actually be successful at this, and I think people, and like, let's be honest, not everybody is. And I think that's an important thing to remember as well. I don't want to, blow smoke and, say everybody's going to succeed. Everybody's going to be able to make a full-time living. I think most people who really put the work in and are willing to pivot, are willing to listen to what their customers and what the market has to say, and are willing to learn and change and evolve. I think if you are really determined, you'll figure it out eventually. I think for most people that's true. But along the way, a lot of people realize that's not what they want to do. Perhaps they just realize they love making and they don't want to be beholden to the market. And so they learn that perhaps just having a hobby business where maybe they sell a few things now and again is fine because they just want to make the stuff and put it out there. They don't want to do the business side of things so much. So there's kind of that range. And I find that a lot of people who come to you or come to me in the beginning aren't quite sure what they really want. Like they might have seen all these, people being successful and they're like, oh, I can do that. Surely it's easy. And don't really understand the amount of work and the amount of time and the amount of patience that you have to put in order to reach that point of success. Like you were saying, what was it, 4 years or something before you went full time? For me, it was probably, at least 2 to 3 years before I was making any sort of decent money from the business. And one of those years was like working on it full time, so, and that was back in, 2010. So I think that have that confidence, but also realize that you can change your mind and you can change direction. Like you don't have to, one of my colleagues has a great saying, it's not a tattoo. Like you don't have to pick one thing and then run with it forever. If you decide you need to change direction or things need to pivot, you can do that. You've got to be flexible. You've got to be willing to evolve. You've got to be willing to experiment. And if you have those things, the confidence, belief in yourself that you can make it happen, the desire, the will to make it happen, and the ability to learn and grow, then I think that's kind of a perfect recipe for success.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more with everything that you just said. I mean, all that makes total sense, and it's absolutely the truth. I mean, I say it all the time. It's about consistency. If you are consistent with dedicating the time and energy and working on your shop and learning, you will find success at some point. It may not be as fast as you want it to be, but you'll get there. It's like building a house. If you start building a house, you lay the foundation, you don't do anything else for a couple of months. The walls aren't going to get built. The roof's not going to get built. You have to continue to work on that house before it gets built. So it's the same way with your business. You have to continue to work on it and continue to learn and just learn to be consistent and build that habit with working on it. And you'll get to where you want to be. I mean, it's so important, and you don't have to have it figured out of the gate, and you don't got to be afraid. Because I think a lot of people too, they love the idea of starting a business or starting their own thing, but that's as far as they get. That's the
Yeah.
exciting part, is like,
Yeah.
is the idea of it. It's like, what could this become? What, how much could this grow? But then when it comes down to
The
opening
grind.
it and actually going, it's like super scary,
Yeah.
and that's a big hurdle, like you were talking about, that people just have to just jump in, get it open, see what happens. What's the worst that it happens? It doesn't work. Okay. That's
Now
you're
you've learned
still
that.
you're still alive. You can do another thing. You can pivot. Yeah, that was funny too, because I think, well, a lot of people, they don't, not funny. I don't know why I say funny, but a lot of people, when they want to get to the full time, but they don't see, you're full time, I'm full time, but they don't see when the days that I got up before work to work on my business, almost every single lunch break, I would work on my business.
Mm-hmm.
After work, I would work on my business. I did that for years while I had a full-time
Mm-hmm.
job, and so that's what people, they're like, well, I want to be full-time, but you have to put in that time. Now it gets easier once you build up your shop, and you don't have to work quite as hard because it's already
No.
established. But getting there, that does take dedication, that you got to carve out that time, cut out some TV time, utilize the time that you have. If you drive, mile is a big thing. I would drive an hour and a half to 2 hours a day, depending on traffic. It's plenty of time to listen to podcasts. You listen to,
Yeah.
you can listen to podcasts and learn. You can't do work while you're driving, but you can listen to
Mm.
podcasts and different trainings. Listen to the Create and Thrive podcast, the Handmade and Beyond podcast, right? Learn
Mm-hmm.
some different things. Utilize your breaks. You just got to make some sacrifices, because we all have the same amount of time. It's just how the choices when it comes down to how you're spending your time. We have the same amount of time as
Yeah.
Elon Musk, Oprah Winfrey, and they're very busy people and they're very successful. So you can't tell me that because that's another thing too. It's like, I'm too busy. I have children. I have all these things going on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm too busy to do this. If it's something that you want, you can carve out time, even if it's 5 minutes a day. 5 minutes every
Mm-hmm.
single day will add up to hours and hours and hours at the end of the year. It's something. So I think it's so important to be, to utilize that, have that right mindset, and utilize the time that you have to your advantage, and make those choices. So
Yeah. And it does get easier. I think it's
mhm.
important that people know that, the first few years are the hardest, because you're learning everything, because it's all new. You're learning everything, you're establishing yourself, you're figuring out what your business is all about, what your brand is all about, who your customers are, like all that stuff, you have to figure it out. But once you've gotten through that first few years, and you've sort of figured all that stuff out, it does get easier. you get more time back. But not to say that it's ever easy. Like, it's not like it's not like there's a point where you arrive and you're like, I'm done now. I've figured everything out. It's perfect. It will work forever. No, that's not the case. That, the world changes, the market changes, people change. Obviously I've been running my business for 13 years now. And, when I started, I had a blog. That's how I marketed my jewelry business, mostly. And so I had a really successful blog. We had Twitter and Facebook. That was the only social media that existed. And I used to buy ads on other people's blogs. And I,
Wow.
like, this is how I got the word out about my business. And I used to do markets and stuff at the beginning as well to get the word out. It's a completely different world now. You've got all these different social media platforms and marketing platforms. The way people shop has changed immensely. Amazon, is a thing. Like
The Goliath
how
of
people.
Amazon is here.
Yeah, right. Which, to be fair, we only got here in the last 2 or 3 years. But still, like, so the way people expect online selling has changed. I think especially in America, I've heard from a lot of people that people, really expect things to be there fast. And but well, if you make handmade, you have to change that expectation. You have to set the expectation up front that it's not going to be like that. And, that's an important part of the process. So there's always new things to learn. There's always new marketing avenues to experiment with. You always have to be paying attention to what's happening in the handmade world. Like you were saying, there's a lot more competition now. So maybe you have to work on your SEO and change things up a little bit. And there's never a point where you can completely rest on your laurels and just, it just works. But it does get easier than those first few years.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you'll learn so much more, so it's easier in
Yeah.
that aspect too. Where you don't something goes wrong, you know what to do because you've been there many times. So that's nice too. But yeah, if if you don't like change, being an entrepreneur or an online small business owner is probably not the gig for you because a lot,
Hmm.
there's always changes. Like it's like, oh, actually changed the algorithm again, or there's the star seller badge. It's like, okay, that's it's gonna be a constant, man. Keep doing your
Always.
thing, keep focused on your business. You'll figure it out. There's always gonna be stuff that changes. You just gotta roll with the punches sometimes. It's just how it goes.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah. So yeah, I could probably talk. We could probably talk shop for hours and hours and hours.
Sure.
But I'll start wrapping this up. Is there anything else that kind of you'd like to say to the listeners that we haven't touched on? I mean, I know we could touch on 1,000 things. I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to talk about. One thing I did want to run by you really fast because you're in the jewelry business.
Hmm.
That's your niche, and that is where photography is so important anyways, but
Hmm.
jewelry, it's like super super important, and a lot of people struggle with that early on, and especially I think in the jewelry niche because the lighting is so hard with depending on what type of jewelry you're selling. Do you have any like quick tips when it comes to getting some high quality photos when it comes to taking them with jewelry?
It's funny you say that because photography was what I was going to mention.
Okay, good. Yeah. And
So important for
yeah,
online
it's probably one of the
selling.
most, if not the important thing
Oh,
outside of
yeah.
SEO when it comes to your shop.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Um, well, I do have a few videos on my YouTube channel, just free videos on like getting better photos. If people want to check that out, it's just under my name, Jess Van Den. But a
Perfect.
few tips. You can use your phone, but I would encourage you to find the manual mode on your phone if your phone has one. So in your camera, most phones will have like a manual mode where you can adjust some of the settings it's called professional or whatever it might be called, because you can fiddle around with some of the camera settings and you will inevitably get a better photo by
Mm.
doing that, because you can adjust things like your ISO and your shutter speed. And if you don't know what those words are, I have a video that explains it, or just Google basic photography terms.
I'll
Learn
link
some
to it.
basic terms.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll link
sure.
to it.
Learn the basics of photography. Like there's like 4 things you have to learn, to adjust on your camera. You don't have to go wild and read the manual or get a fancy camera, but on your, if you have a phone camera and you can adjust some things, just play with that a little bit because you'll get a better photo. Use a tripod if you can't, if your hands are a little bit shaky or whatever, use a tripod to get it, because you need, especially for jewelry, you need a nice crisp photo. You can use like an external, or you can set a timer so that 2 seconds it takes the photo. Lighting is incredibly important. Play around with it. Nice natural light is beautiful, but if you can't have natural light, then obviously diffuse white light. I find a lot of people, beginners, who used to like their ceiling lights, which I guess these days a lot of them are LEDs, so they probably are white light, but get yourself proper daylight bulbs for lighting. And I have like a couple of softbox lights, you can buy them on eBay or Amazon or whatever for not very much money, but it's definitely worth the investment to make sure you have good lighting. So yeah, it comes down to good lighting, know your camera settings, get crisp shots, and also experiment with angles. Now, I'm not a fan of white backgrounds for a lot of things. Okay, let me clarify. I make sterling silver jewelry. I'm not a fan of white backgrounds for sterling silver jewelry because it doesn't really stand out on a white background. It kind of disappears, especially if it's overexposed at all. So don't be afraid of experimenting with your backgrounds as well, because you might find that a different color really brings out your product, and that's what you want. You want your product to pop off the screen, and you want to catch people's attention. Okay, so I think in the handmade you have a bit more leeway to play around with that sort of thing. So play around with that. Make sure the background contrasts against your product, and that way you'll get a bit more of a eye-catching photo, and play around with different angles. Like a lot of beginners, again, I see they just take like that one front on flat photo, which is good. Like you need that photo, but you can also lower the angle and move around a bit and just play around a little bit, try to be a little bit more creative with your photos, because what you're aiming for is twofold. You're aiming for a beautifully lit, crisp, clear shot that shows your product, but you're also aiming for a photo that catches people's attention and stands out from the crowd. So if you can do those two things, you're going to be like so far ahead of so many people.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, that's awesome. Really, really awesome tips. Yeah, because it's like anything. It's a lot of trial and error, and it's hard to tell someone exactly what to do because there's so many variables when it comes to photography, and it just really depends what niche you're in too. And I know jewelry is one of the more complex ones, and it's one of those things, you want it to stand out, like you said, and I totally agree with that. And the way that I try to remind people that most people are finding you in search, and your picture is this big, and there's 100 other pictures this big. So if
especially on a phone,
yeah, I'm like, if your item is, if you can't see what the heck it is, and it's fuzzy and it's not well lit, people are going to go scrolling right by you, and they're never going to click or see your item. So that's how you have to think of look at it small and see how it may look great blown up. Everything does.
Oh yeah.
But when you shrink it down and you can't tell what the heck it is, ain't anyone going to click on that, So
yeah.
But yeah, that's awesome. Really, really good tips. Some stuff I haven't thought about. I haven't really thought about playing with the phone camera settings too much, because a lot of I agree, you don't need a fancy camera. Your phone works great, and a lot of that stuff is built in, but it makes sense because sometimes it does things that you probably don't want it to do depending on the lighting and stuff. So that makes just because it's defaulting to certain things, it may not always be the best.
Yeah, the big one is your ISO setting, because if you don't have enough light on your item, your camera will adjust that. And if you ever end up with grainy pictures, that's what's happening. So that's what you need to adjust, because it's doing is it's kind of absorbing more light. It's because there's not enough light on the subject, so you end up with that grainy look to the picture. So make sure to learn a little bit about that, and it might make a big difference if that's a problem you have.
That makes total sense. So where awesome conversation, lots of good stuff that we talked about. Where can people find more, about your business, and if they want to connect with you as far as that goes?
Yeah, sure. Well, my jewelry business is ethereal. So I'll let you link to that, because it's a made up word.
I was going to say, ethereal. I don't know what that is, but I'm not going to admit it in case.
No, it's totally a made up word. So it's all good. It's all good. Ethereal.com, or you can find me on Etsy as well, obviously. For my teaching, it's createandthrive.com. And if you want to kind of get in touch, just hit me up on Create and Thrive at Instagram. So just at Create and Thrive, all one word, at Instagram is probably the best way to get in touch. And I also have, YouTube, just Jess Van Den on YouTube, a lot of free content there, and my podcast and so on. So yeah.
Awesome. Lots of good ways to connect with you. So, but yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show, Jess. It was really valuable. And I know my listeners will get a lot out of the conversation and motivation and inspiration. So that's always what I'm trying to do with these podcasts. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. And I enjoy your show too. So I'm honored to be here. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. All right, guys, that is it for this episode. I'll be back with another awesome episode for you guys very, very soon. In the meantime, if you need help, additional help starting, building, growing your handmade business, tips, tricks, tactics, strategies, support, all that good stuff, make sure you go to handmadeandbeyond.com. Lots of good stuff there for you guys. Outside of that, if you guys enjoy this podcast, please take the time and leave a 5-star review. I'd really, really appreciate it. Have an amazing rest of your day and week. Talk to you guys later.